Hayley Nebauer is a costume designer known for Doctor Who, The Musketeers, The Capture, and her new project is the Hulu series Black Cake. Hayley, this show tells a massive story spanning countries and decades and class structures and characters. I guess as a costume designer, like, where did you start in terms of wanting to tell the story?
You're right. It was a really exciting project when it came up. The earliest part of the story spans from 1940 in Jamaica, and it goes right through to present day, hitting every decade in between. So I guess where I started when I first read the scripts was you kind of want to start with the parts you're most excited about, which for me was the 60s in Jamaica, because I didn't know a lot about it. And so I had to really get into the heavy research and find out not what I already knew about the 60s generally for fashion from other countries, but what was happening in Jamaica at the time, what were the little truths and the things that, the nuances that helped tell the story and get the feeling right for who those people were and what they wore, how they expressed themselves in that specific place and time. So it really started there. And there were some online archives and libraries and things we could go to. But in the end, the place where I got a lot of the really authentic material from were people's family photo albums in Jamaica. Which was brilliant. You could see the homemade swimsuits that people had, photographs from people's weddings, kids walking to school, all the different levels of the story that we go across and what those people were wearing. It was great.
And then do you start then, are you building the costumes? Are you finding like original like pieces? Like how did you kind of like go from there?
It was a bit of everything, really. We went to all the costume houses and tried to do a bit of a recce to see what they had that was appropriate for the period. But there were lots of interesting little, I don't know, incongruous things about some of the pieces that were really popular in Jamaica at the time, like Clark's footwear. They loved Clark's British shoes. The suede desert boots and things were kind of the coolest shoes in Jamaica at the time. And all of those generally have sort of long since perished, but we did actually manage to find one vintage wholesaler who had boxes of them in a warehouse, and they were all the authentic ones from the 60s that we could use. So we got all of those here in the UK. We did get pieces from hire houses, but we also had to make a huge quantity of pieces. All the swimwear was generally custom made using vintage references. We had fabrics printed up with the vintage prints to match, choosing all the colors. So we had some nice harmonious contrasts between the pairs of characters when they're in the water and at the beach. It was really quite a lot of fun, the scope of materials we tried to reproduce to capture the essence of what people wore in Jamaica at the time, and also transferring that to other areas of the show. The main different, I guess, aesthetics or color palettes we had across the show. In Jamaica, it was all these sort of sun-bleached tropical colors and sorbets and optimistic and refreshing and light. But then when the story moves to London, it's not a place of hope. It's not swinging London in the 60s. It's very bleak and it's desaturated, and there's lots of beiges and greys until you get to the boarding house in South London, where we've got this vibrant Caribbean community wearing all these interesting knit pieces that were very specific to their subculture at the time. So trying to make sure that we built up what was authentic to the characters in the story, but also differentiating the color palettes from one place to another. We also had another color palette for Edinburgh, and we had some for Italy, and then also some for contemporary LA. So as the episodes and the stories jump back and forth from one place to another, we're instantly planted in that part of the narrative so the audience knows where they are, and it sets the tone for where the story is going next.
Yeah, it's really incredible work. One of the things I love about the show too is that you have obviously like all the all of the characters honestly are either have, we don't need to spoil it, but they have like different secrets and different things they have not told other people. And I was wondering, especially with like Covey, like how did you think about the characters and like how that would impact how they dress, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like the idea that they've got things they're hiding, or I don't know, did you think about that? And like kind of maybe with Covey specifically, and as she evolves into like, we meet her later as Eleanor, like as an adult, this is all in the first episode, but like how did you think about that? And like kind of how her history would impact her wardrobe and stuff as she got to be an adult?
Sure. Generally speaking, throughout the show, a lot of the mid-century characters, we were playing to the idea that people, as they did, usually dressed more for the class and the times, and how they would be perceived as being respectable by others around them. But when we got to the young characters, we had to have some fun with it, because they had that sense of excitement and optimism, and got a sense of color into it as well. Covey's color is yellow. We always see her in sunshine yellow in Jamaica. And whenever we have moments where she's experiencing happiness again, that sunshine yellow comes out in unexpected ways. Sometimes it's gifted to her by surprise or by luck from someone. Sometimes it's in a flashback memory when she's thinking about better times. We also had a little bit of androgyny mixed into the wardrobe with the styling for Bunny when we're in Jamaica. So she's got denim, and she's a little bit of a tomboy, and we have certain things we're hinting at about her story, but never being very overt, never giving it away, showing that she was a very athletic, very sporting young woman, and to show that she was quite pragmatic in her mindset. And we had that reflecting in her having a slightly more androgynous feel within what was realistic for the time in her style. Other things in terms of secrets, there's one color that we tried to do a total color avoidance on throughout the series, and that was lilac, which if you read the book of Black Cake, all 3 generations of women in the family, they just absolutely abhor that color. It's an instinctive thing. And for us in Black Cake, that color only comes up in very few selected occasions when there's a real feeling of disgust about what's happened or what's about to happen next. And it's a very subtle little visual cue, but that's something that's sort of planted like an Easter egg throughout. The other little thing that we hid sort of as a personal expression was that Covey really loved daisies. And we have that as a little reoccurring motif. It's on her wedding dress. It pops up at other places along the way. When she sometimes sees some characters or things that she connects with, we might have little daisies in there as well. But as her story progresses, she, without giving too much away about the story, she loses her own wardrobe. Who Covey is in Jamaica, by the time she becomes Coventina in London, her identity and her wardrobe changes with that. What she has access to, each time her identity changes, everything that she had before goes away, and she doesn't have access to it anymore. And her whole wardrobe is then based on the character, the persona, the identity she's adopting from that point forwards. And it's not always within her control. Most of the time, it's generally not. So by the time she becomes a mature character and is living in California, we see that she's very much someone who wants to be respected and fit in, and wants to be noticed as being acceptable, but doesn't want to stick her head too far above the parapet, really. She's not trying to be a fashionista and draw attention. She's trying to show you what she is, that she is very, she's affluent and she's aspirational, but she's also quite modest in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And so she tracks this arc, showing that she's always trying to get to the next sort of chapter in life and get through it calmly, because there's so many things around her she can't control. She's trying to find the joy, and with what she has, she does that quite well, I think. But it's not always within her control.
Right. You mentioned there her wedding dress too. Obviously, that's like a key component in the story, and like that you come back to the wedding night a lot. I guess like you mentioned like kind of the flourishes and stuff, but were there a lot of options for that, how that would look, and like how'd you kind of like, land on the eventual wedding dress?
I looked at a lot of different real 1960s wedding dresses in person, and some images from the time, people's wedding albums from Jamaica. In the end, what we settled on was a mixture of these references together, something that we felt was a choice that her husband-to-be, Little Man, would approve of. He was the one who's taken her to the most expensive wedding shop in Kingston in Jamaica. He's the one who's choosing the most ostentatious dress he can for her, fitting with the styles of the time. So none of that is of Covey's choosing, but the little daisies she has along it, those are hers, and there's something of hers in it. But it's very much the whole choice of what that wedding dress is not really hers. So we tried to go with something that would be wearing your wealth and showing your power, which is what her husband, Little Man, was doing and was also putting onto her. But we also wanted it to be beautiful and striking, and I mean, anything would look great on Mia. She can wear clothes brilliantly. But that one felt like it was an elegant simplicity to it that didn't distract from the story with too much fuss. And it was also quite physically convenient for the story, because what happens after the wedding It was a 1960s style little shift dress that then had a huge overskirt over the top that could be clipped off and removed. And so as the wedding dress all came away, it came away in pieces and layers until, she was the bride stripped bare on the beach, completely vulnerable. So it was a dress design that in the end gave us those layers and that opportunity to lose them.
Yeah, it's incredible work, and the show is great. Hayley Nebauer, we're talking about Black Cake, the Hulu series coming soon. Thank you so much, Hayley, for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sarah Arthur is a costume designer and a 2-time Emmy nominee for Sherlock. Other projects have included A Discovery of Witches, Dracula, The Sandman, and her new series is the Peacock show, The Continental, from the world of John Wick. Sarah, in terms of the John Wick cinematic universe, there's obviously a very specific, I feel like, an identifiable look to the costumes. So for the prequel show, I guess, how did you balance kind of, setting up maybe what will come, but also like doing something original and era appropriate for the setting of the show?
Well, Albert Hughes, our director, was extremely involved in all the looks for the Continental. It was based in the 1970s. This was our start, and the first episode was very Studio 54-esque. That was the opening sequence. So so very extravagant. And obviously Winston Scott, who was, one of the only ones from the actual John Wick franchise, played by Colin Woodall. So he was trying to mimic a little bit of the current John Wick franchise in the costumes, using the cravats and the handkerchiefs and very, the pinstripe suits for his character. It was a lot, hugely influenced by Albert Hughes on all the characters. But so that's where we started with the 70s.
So I love the 70s looks and stuff. And I also feel like, I guess I wanted to ask you a little about, like, to me, the show, it's like, feels like a heightened version of the 70s, I guess, at least, or you know what I mean? Like, there is some, not a fantastical element to it, but it's like slightly more surreal, or I guess, so I guess in your research, were you kind of like, are you trying to really replicate the era to the letter, or are you kind of taking liberties because you can, because of the kind of the John Wick universe kind of allows that?
Yeah, no, we definitely stuck to the period. I mean, I had Ian Schrager's Studio 54 book, which was full of photographic references of Liza Minnelli, the Rolling Stones, Jerry Hall. I mean, you name it, they all went there, statesmen. So it was an incredible reference point, certainly for that opening sequence. And we had the Lady Godiva on the horse. We had Bianca Jagger look-alike. We did mimic a huge amount of those costumes. I also used the Alan Tannenbaum New York in the 70s, which was full of photographic reference. So we did mimic, and in fact, I managed to get lots and lots of original 1970s costumes, and we used as many as we could when only one costume was needed. But of course, as is the nature of the John Wick franchise, we had massive stunt scenes and needed many, many duplicates. So I used these original suits and dresses and waistcoats and jumpsuits, and we took patterns from, and because we had to multiply them by quite a few. So that was good fun. But yeah, we definitely stuck within the realms of the real 70s clothing and shoes and bags and accessories. And right at the beginning, we had all these henchmen, as is in the John Wick setup. And so I decided immediately to get 200 suits manufactured, 70 suits and shirts, and so that we could accommodate all of these stunts and these car drives and So yeah, so it was the prep for this was extremely important because of all the action.
When you mentioned the act, obviously like that opening scene and the whole show is just like the action is unbelievable. It's like absolutely to the level I think fans of the franchise films would expect, right? I mean, it's just as like really incredible set pieces. How much is like knowing the physicality of the performers then, or the actor, the stunt actors and all those things, do you have to like craft the costumes differently, knowing the amount of stress that they will have to undergo to actually perform the stunts, I guess?
Well, I think you choose the fabric carefully. I mean, the fabric in the 70s was quite stretchy, some of it, and so that helped a lot with these suits. We inserted gussets in, the crutches and under the arms at times that you couldn't really, you couldn't see. But yeah, sometimes you've got to, make allowances for harnesses and all that business, but that's normal, in any project. But yeah, we just had a multitude of duplicates.
Incredible. You mentioned Winston before, obviously, and it's like the origin story of him and the hotel, obviously the Continental. There is even a joke in the script about his cravat versus the ascot. I think that's in the first episode, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's like very recognizable for him and for fans of the movies with Ian McShane and stuff. I guess, like, how did you land on like what the proper, ascot or cravat would look like for him and like his whole look, and thinking about, I guess, how he would have dressed then versus how his dress would maybe evolve or connect to what we see in the films with Ian McShane?
Well, it was Albert. He was adamant that the Americans call what we call a cravat an ascot. There was a massive ongoing joke about this. So, and of course, Colin Woodall as Winston started his adventure in London in a high-flying business deal, and of course all of that London restaurant, that with everyone there wore original pieces because nothing needed duplicating other than his costume going forward, and so yes, we call it a cravat, the Americans call it an ascot, so it's slight confusion initially, but then it became a bit of a standing joke.
Yeah, it's like soccer and football, right? For us Americans,
I think so.
It's so silly we call it soccer, right?
And a waistcoat and a vest. That's the other one that we say differently.
Yeah, the one other character I want to ask you about too, and I guess connecting a little bit to the movies, was Sharon, played by Lance Reddick in the films, late Lance Reddick, and we see him here as a much younger character, right? And I guess did you talk, like, how did you think about connecting him to what we see in the films, or was that, since he's not as much of a major character, though he is a supporting character in this show, like, I guess, like, how did you kind of think about him and his look and referencing what we know now as the character, I guess?
Well, again, we mimicked Lance's costumes from the John Wick films. We put AO in the greys and the slightly more boring cut. Very plain, ties and shirts. So there was no flamboyance there, but just a similar color palette, really. But obviously in a 70s cut, but not as structured as some of the other suits, and the cloth wasn't as good as some of it's Cormac suits and Collins suits. So yeah, I
like that. The details of that are great. I mean, you mentioned like there's so many different types of characters in this show. I mean, like different, like you said, like from the Studio 54 to the the gun runners and all these different things. I just found that like it's just a wealth of, and the assassins, there's so many different types. I guess, did you have like, was there someone you were, or a character, like, what was your most, like, I guess, challenging or most fun character maybe to dress, or even if it's a smaller one, or I don't even know, like Hansel, all of the looks are so unique and great. I just was like, it feels like an embarrassment of riches. So I guess for you, what was it like to, was there a specific one that you were most challenged or had most fun with?
The twins were great fun. And actually, although it looks very simple, because they were both contortionists and they used their, they were legs and arms everywhere. So but they were so severe and straight that the costume needed to just always be straight. And so but it needed huge flexibility, and then to return to how they looked, which was very straight. So So that was an interesting. I mean, we shot this series in Budapest, and interestingly enough, they have an incredible amount of original pieces there. So I did manage to get a lot of original 70s costumes. They're not for the twins, but their boots came to mind. I mean, they were earlier, but they came, you know, we managed to get those in Budapest. But because of the extreme action, I had to manufacture some to hold these boots on, so that when they were kicking the boots were flying off. So it was little things like that. But then, you know, the adjudicator, Katie McGrath, you know, that was a great fun one to do. And I based her costumes on the early Terry Mugler, you know, slightly exaggerated shoulders, which may not, some would say, is slightly correct for the 70s, but edging more towards the later 70s. But I felt that she needed that stature, and then with the mask, obviously. But you know, as you just said, it was such good fun to do all of these characters and to individualize them. And a lot of the main characters wore original pieces that we copied identically. So it was really nice to have that feel of original pieces and then exact copies for these stunts. But I think, you know, we did lots of different areas of New York, Chinatown. So we made that much more brown, you know, and beiges and light. And then we had Harlem, which was huge color and lots of hats and wide legs. And, you know, and it was such a massive variety of costumes.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch as well. So we have to have it here. Sarah Arthur, the Continental from the World of Not John Wick on Peacock. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Carol Case's career has included Heartland, Let Him Go, High School, and Billy the Kid, and her new project is the latest season of the FX series Fargo. Carol, you've worked on other seasons of Fargo before this 5th season, so I guess obviously it's an anthology series, but has your approach changed over time, or do you kind of start off in the same fashion every time you're going to do a Fargo season?
I think pretty well it's the same method. And Noah Hawley, the showrunner, producer, writer, brains of the entire sequence, usually has a vision, and then we all start from character work, whatever period, whether it was season 2, which took place in the 70s, or whether it's this latest one, which is 2019. So it's all based pretty much on character, and we sort of drill down on what these people are and where they are. And because it's such a specific locale, how much action is involved, what's going to happen, because I'm not sure how much you've seen of it, but things move at quite a pace, and there's not always, we have to be prepared for costumes to go from houses right into winter blizzards in one leap.
Mm-hmm. I have seen a decent amount of it, not the whole thing yet, and it's great. I want to ask, you mentioned like this season takes place in 2019. I found that really fascinating because it's like, obviously it's recent, it's history, right? Because we're in 2023, but it's not like things are so different from 4 years ago. And I guess but it's still a specific time. So I guess, does that impact on kind of how you're working on it? Are you like thinking of, like you said, like the area and stuff, and like what people would have been wearing 4 or 5 years ago versus now at all?
Well, I think so. For the main characters, a lot of the pieces are either made or adjusted from what you could buy now. I think that I think it really and truly, it is more about the character than the time.
Okay.
And the believability of where we are.
So you have great characters here, I would say. The first one just is Dot, played by Juno Temple. We meet her as like a homemaker, but she's obviously got a larger backstory and a little bit of a secret past, I think we could say. But I was like, I guess, like, so how did her life, I guess, how did you think of her, and like knowing that she is someone who is maybe trying to not put herself out there, to say diplomatically or whatever. I guess, how did you kind of like think about how she would dress when we meet her and like her character and what she's been through to get there, I guess?
Well, when we first meet her, she's like at a school function, I think. And so where Noah and I kind of went is we wanted her to be unnoticeable in the group. We're not, but still, she's still our leading lady. And we have to be able to think back to, oh, that's the lady in the plaid coat at the end. So I think that a lot of what we did with Juno, I mean, she's so great. She can wear a paper bag and she'd be fabulous. But she was involved, and Noah was involved in getting Dot's look right. And we ended up with the overalls. She wears overalls, and she always wears a yellow cardigan. And you might notice that through the entire show. So that's kind of her signature look. I think that the overall's just a practical mom look. She's still young. She's still kind of interested in fashion, but she's not dressing for anybody but herself.
Right. And then how about the other character who I'd say is another great, and they're all great characters on the show, not just saying this, but like John Hamm playing Sheriff Roy Tillman. What a look. The shearling jacket, I think, is incredible. And he has these nipple rings as well, which I think we've seen in the trailer, people have seen. It's just, he is got a bunch of contradictions, I feel like, in his looks or whatever, but I just love the cowboy hat, everything about him. I just think it is great. And I guess like, yeah, like how did you guys talk about him and like think about the character as we meet him later, I guess?
Well, I think for John, it was mostly about, we started with the image of the Marlboro Man from the, those 60s and 70s ads, the cigarette ads. And even the fact that they're cigarette ads kind of says a lot about who he is, right? And you don't want to hate him right from the beginning. So I think that we just wanted him to be believable. We were shooting in southern Alberta, which is cowboy country. So believable as that kind of a character, but still have the slightly romanticized look of that West, the modern West.
He's great. I mean, you were mentioning Juno. I feel like John Hamm, you put him in almost anything and he looks incredible as well. He's just like so handsome and like really, really good.
Exactly. And he was right into it. I mean, you'll notice he's wearing all the right stuff. He's, he didn't shy away from the giant belt buckle. He didn't shy away from the hat. He was right into it. And that helped a lot because it gives us a very definite man of the land, rather than later when we start getting into more of the crime side of it.
Right.
So more uniforms and things.
And not to just go.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And the fact that he is a sheriff, but he's a maverick, right? So he's a sheriff, but it's like uniforms aren't his world. So it's like, I'll wear whatever I feel like when I feel like it. And so it ended up to be, in a strange way, a little bit of a uniform because he always wears that sheepskin jacket. But it's of his own making.
He also has, again, I think this is properly in the trailer, but so it's not necessarily spoiler, but there's a scene where he's in a hot tub and he stands up and he has this towel that's incredible because it has his Roy Tillman face on it, which I just loved. I thought that was such a great touch. And I feel like I understand it's probably not a costume, but I just was like, that part is really great. I want to ask you, like, a lot of this season there's, again, no spoilers talking around this, but it takes place during Halloween season. There's a great sequence where a very famous Halloween movie factors into a look for the costumes, I guess. And I just thought that was great. And the masks are so incredibly detailed and perfect. And I just thought all of that was like really great. And I guess without, again, spoiling, how'd you guys think about that and like kind of find those, like, did you have to make those, or were those like, did you kind of find that, I guess? I just thought that
it was a bit of everything. We put some of it together. And we had approval from the originator of that particular movie. So we were able to play pretty authentically with the stuff. Now, the thing is that, and as everyone knows, having Halloween just had happened, is that there's not a lot of stunts you can do wearing a giant Halloween mask. So there were a lot of adjustments. The prop department was heavily involved in, how do we get this to work and how do we connect this to that? And so it was quite a collaborative effort. And the actors were very brave about it all.
Yeah,
Falling
it's great.
downstairs in masks is a tricky item.
Yeah, it's really great. I'm very excited for people to see that. You mentioned like the crime aspect of it, and there's obviously also so many law enforcement people on the show as well, which is not surprising since it's Fargo. And I guess like, yeah, are you going to, like, you mentioned like specific area and stuff, are you like trying to make the police uniforms as authentic as possible, or are you kind of like taking some dramatic license on those, or like how do you work those, like for Lamorne maybe, or like I just find all of those, they look so specific, and I think it's really good, like even Joe as well for Gator.
Yeah, because there's several law enforcement agencies involved, and also because it's Fargo, so there's a little bit of sideways movement, let's put it that way. He with Lamorne, like those uniforms aren't that color anymore, but it's what we traditionally think of as the Fargo colors. So we like to stick with that, and it also is great because it's not yet another modern look. So it gives us a bit of that feel of hearkening to the past and how the people of that area are connected to the land and the history of that area. And so that's why we moved it to different colors and trying to make it specific, because it's a tricky story to tell with so many different law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, but I think you guys do a great job balancing it for the viewer. And while we spoke around a lot of spoilers here, I hope people like really enjoy the show. I just think it's wonderful stuff, and your costumes are incredible. Carol Case, we have to wrap up here, but Fargo, the new season is out later this year. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Mirren Gordon-Crozier's career has included Short-Term 12, The Girl from Plainview, Where the Crawdads Sing, and The Burial. And her new project is the Apple TV Plus limited series Lessons in Chemistry. Mirren, this is, I think, your fourth project with Brie Larson. And that's wonderful. How has your relationship, I guess, evolved with her, and what makes her such a great collaborator?
Working with Brie Larson is amazing. She, basically from the beginning, I did Short-Term 12 with her, which was about, I think, 10 years ago. So kind of both at the beginning of our careers, and even though she's been in a lot, and it was sort of like her breakout role a bit. And we didn't know each other very well, but we both worked with Daniel Destin Cretton. And so after that, we did The Glass Castle with one another, and that's when we kind of got to know each other better. I think we both had the same perspective, point of view, and also like sense of humor in a way. Not that that really helps what goes on screen, but it helps with behind the scenes. And then she directed a movie actually called The Unicorn Store. And so that's, I really got to see her from a different angle. She also starred in that. And I think she was able to put a lot of trust in me, knowing that she was having two roles, being the director and the actor. And so that, we're just really good at collaborating with one another. And she really trusts me. And so getting to Lessons in Chemistry, she put me up for the job. And because it's a limited series, obviously, and she's the lead, she's, sometimes has 12 changes per episode. And so each fitting was about 5 hours long, and we had plenty of them. And so just having that previous experience with her, and just made it go smoothly. And I think it's such a pleasure to be able to work with the same actor over and over again. You can really do your best work without being nervous about their own, personal issues with, let's say, fabric or fit or little things like that. So yeah, it's sort of a dream, actually.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, all that stuff is really great. So it's like, I feel like you guys have a great rapport together, obviously. And I think the proof is in the products, right? So I guess like with this show, based on a beloved book, I feel, and I guess, how did you guys talk about the wardrobe and Elizabeth's look? Like you said, there's a ton of costume changes, period, like all these different things, and she's doing different things in her life. So I guess like, yeah, like where do you start when you have something like this that seems so complicated?
Yeah. Well, the show starts 1950, so right on 1950. So we're still sort of in like the late 40s then. And she's a lab technician, even though she at once was trying to get her PhD in science, and that didn't happen. You kind of learn throughout the series. So she's a woman in a position that she's overqualified for, sort of dealing with a bunch of goofy men who are asking her to get them coffee and things like that, when she really just wants to study the abogenesis, the beginning of life. And so she, with her costume, we're trying to have her not stand out really from the men. Color palette's very similar, dusty, muted tones, a lot of plaids, sweater vests, things a lot of the men also wore, as opposed to the secretaries of the science lab, Hastings, who wore their perfect matching ensembles, bows and pastels and things like that. And then as we move on, I don't know how much I should reveal about the story, but she gets a job hosting. She's also an incredible cook and uses a lot of science with her cooking, and at home wears a lab coat because she believes it covers the most surface area, and she doesn't understand why people would just wear an apron. So that's sort of like the base for her lab coats, which we then see on her cooking show. And with that, we were able to have a lot of fun, because I think she just sort of opens up a bit and leans into being a TV show host, even though it's not necessarily her dream or end goal. I think she starts to really love it and love the women that are watching it and being inspired by her. And so I got a lot of inspiration from Dior, especially in that period. And he sort of I went to this exhibition in Paris and the Dior show, and when you walk in, it's a million white dresses, basically all the samples that he made, and they're all in white muslin. And going back to that, I really just had this concept of being within like the parameters of a lab coat, toiling with different concepts of how it could look, different piping, different collars, different sequins, adjustable this and that, and yeah, we were really able to explore every lab coat under the sun by the end of it, and probably could have gone on, I think, for another series too. So
you mentioned like the cooking show Supper at 6. I think the opening of the first episode, we see her like kind of walking in, and she has, I think in that first episode, definitely throughout the series, she wears green. She certainly evolves into wearing like green or a greenish color, right? I'm not if it maybe, and I guess like you mentioned like the color, like why was that the appropriate color for her, did you feel, or like how did you guys kind of talk about that?
Yeah, so she wears a lot of green throughout the season. There's one specific sort of olive green I love, and was also not only very specific to that time period, but she goes through a lot of growth and change, and green sort of represents that as well. And so throughout every episode, we I would say heavy on the green, different shades, but just sort of representing like her different growth and stages in her life. And we do see a whole spectrum of 10 years of her life, or more. So wanting to ground her a bit by keeping consistency with a color as well.
And then obviously, like her, I feel like her dresses, her whole look, and a lot of the other women on the show are great. But I want to ask a little about the men fashion as well, and like how you kind of like, I feel like that, and especially in like period pieces, sometimes I feel like not always paying it super attention to the male characters, but they're all dressed like very obviously very appropriate, and like all these different things. Was that, I mean, was that a challenge, or like how'd you kind of think of those characters, I guess?
Oh yeah, I love menswear, and shirting and suits. And so the men in the lab, Hastings was early 40s, so a lot of the ties were more printed, a little more comical, also because of their characters. But you know, when it came to Calvin, we did a lot of research on his running look, and if you watch the show, you kind of realize that running is not really a known thing back then, and people are confused about what he's wearing and why he's running, and is it for exercise, or what are you running from? And so we obviously had to have multiples because of sweat and different things. And so we took, you know, basic cotton sweatpants and altered them. So his sweatshirts are shorter, as they were in that time period. His sweatpants are taller, more high-waisted. You know, he wears his PF flyers, I think they're called, to run in, which obviously I don't think anyone would run in those now. But yeah, a lot of research. You know, I mean, I'm so specific, even down to his like t-shirts and the width of the band, and the fit of the t-shirt and the cotton and the you know, I think you could go quite wrong with a white t-shirt, in fact. So getting the right white t-shirt and the right size and fit is just as important for me as the fit of a dress, or it's even more challenging, I think.
Yeah, well, it gets, because everybody has like a white t-shirt, right? So like kind of like how, you know, kind of could tell. It's just great. It's really great stuff. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but Lessons in Chemistry is the show. Mirren Gordon-Crozier, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Lyn Paolo is a 2-time Emmy winner for Homefront, and also received nominations for The West Wing and Queen Charlotte. And she's here now to talk about the Netflix series Queen Charlotte. Lyn, I read when you get a job, you obviously start with like the script and what's written, and that flows into research and mood boards and all that good stuff. And with this, I guess since it's a prequel to Bridgerton, and I know you did at least some consulting work on Bridgerton, does that add another layer to your process and preparation at all, knowing that it's a prequel that you kind of have to lean into, I guess, or lead into?
I think, yeah, I mean, and I want to give a quick shout out to Hayley, who's also on this, because she was actually one of our fabulous ACDs on Queen Charlotte. So she deserves that shout out. She worked so hard on the show with us. Yeah, the you know, the remit from Shonda was, you do what you do, to me. You know, we had an early meeting where, you know, we were literally, Laura Fracon and I were working on Bridgerton, and Shonda's team reached out and said, we're going to do this prequel and Shonda would like to chat. So we had a chat, and we made a few mood boards, and I actually really pitched, this is a very different period. You know, the 1760s looks completely different from Regency. I pitched that we should base the costumes more on modern fashion, more on sort of a Met Ball, Zac Posen, Christian Dior, you know, Vivienne Westwood feel, but also try to make the show feel like, you know, we're being fairly true to the period, but we're obviously taking artistic license in trying to make the costumes appeal to a modern eye. And I do love that Shonda put at the very beginning of the series, you know, this is not, you know, exact history. You know, we're having fun with this. And I think that's important for the audience to know, because so many historians will say, oh, well, gosh, you know, that sleeve wasn't quite right. Well, yes, we know it wasn't quite right. We we're basically knocking off the Alexander McQueen exploded sleeves, so excuse us, but we're having fun with this. And I hope creating a beautiful, lasting image of a powerful young woman trying to make her way in a very difficult world.
I definitely think you did that. You mentioned Hayley as an ACD, and you mentioned Laura as well. I know you worked very closely with her on this. For you, like, how important is that collaboration with, especially with a show like this, where I'd imagine there's hundreds of costumes and you're kind of building probably a lot and all these different things.
Yeah, I mean, Hayley will speak to that for us. Honestly, without Hayley and her magic fingers at getting, cutting everything on bias and sending it off to the pleater, we would, I will be forever grateful to her for the hours she spent doing that. It's a huge undertaking, this show. And you're nothing without your crew. Let's be honest. You can have all the most amazing ideas in the world, and you can be sitting in your office thinking, I think we'll do this for this scene or that. But without the amazing technicians, tailors, makers, jewelers, milliners, without that whole, I think we had over 200 people working on the show at one point. Without those teams, you're just sitting in a room drawing pretty pictures. Or with me scratching. I mean, look, I'm even doing it now. I'll be sit here scratching sort of stick figures that you then pass on to an illustrator. So, you're nothing without your team.
Yeah. You mentioned getting the evolution of Charlotte, obviously, and kind of what we saw in Bridgerton and getting there with this, I guess, and obviously the eras are so different. Like you were saying, the period is different, I guess. So how did you kind of try to find, or did you try to find connective tissue between what the viewers of Bridgerton would know of Queen Charlotte versus what you're showing in the show, I guess, in this show?
Yeah, I think I was certainly fortunate that I had worked on Bridgerton this season before, for season 2 of Bridgerton, because I really did sort of, and thanks to Sophie, the designer on that season, have sort of a very intimate insight into what Golda's character on Bridgerton wears. And then you sort of had to reverse engineer that look and think to yourself, well, Queen Charlotte sort of, as many sort of middle-aged women do, they stick to the look that they loved from their youth. Yes, young women who grow into, they're like, oh, if you're in the 70s, but you were young in the 50s, you'll still love the Dior look. Do you know what I'm saying? So how to translate that, but also feel youthful. And I think we did that with color more than anything else, because Golda's character is always in those very dark, regal tones. And for young Charlotte, we started with sort of the lighter, the pastels. Everything was burnished or shot with gold or silver as much as we could. A lot of shot taffeta, just to give a hint of the regal elements of Golda's costumes. But we definitely played around with color with all the characters as it happens. And I will say that the thing that was, I think, the most fun for me was that we were also dressing some of the original cast from the Regency part of Bridgerton, obviously Regency, but it was winter in that story arc, because it was a sad time, wasn't it? I mean, their princess dies. And how do you tell the Bridgerton side of the story, but make it look distinctly different? And it was fortunate that Shonda had written it, that it would be, this whole arc into the winter and then spring again, when gardens are in bloom. So it was a joyous, when I look back now, as difficult as it might have been to be away from my family for as long as I was living in London, and I loved London. And the crew is amazing. I just think Queen Charlotte is one of those shows that you look back on in your career and think, yeah, that was a special moment.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Shonda a lot. Obviously, I know you worked with her frequently, and I guess how is she as a collaborator in terms of the costumes, and what are your discussions like usually?
Yeah, I just saw Shonda last week, and I'm actually working for her right now on a new show. I'm really lucky and fortunate that I get to work with her because she loves the costume department. You know, she absolutely adores getting sketches, and she's a fabulous collaborator, although she gives you, honestly, the most creative freedom. She often will say, are you happy with that? And I'll go, yeah, I like it. I want to change this, this, and this. And she goes, you know, you do you, basically. Off you go. Which is a great gift for a costume designer, but she's also very specific about what she wants, and I appreciate that. So that whole sequence in the coach at the beginning, and that fantastic speech about I'm going to be impaled by whalebone, you know, that whole sequence with young Charlotte with her brother in the coach heading to get married, was all on the page. I mean, the only thing we changed is that I wrote to Chandra and said, I really want this gown to be sort of in the blue tones, and can we change the stones on the bodice to sapphires? You know, she had written rubies, and she goes, yeah, of course, yeah, I'll change it. So, you know, it's lovely to have that, you know, be able. And by the way, she was not in London, obviously, she was in the States. So thank goodness for technology that we're able to communicate so quickly.
Yeah, one of the great things about technology, I guess, is that many negatives maybe as well. I guess
Yeah.
I was
we're all trapped in our homes during COVID.
Yeah, it's great. I was reading. I think there's something like 80 gowns for Charlotte. Is some in that range? I guess. Does that sound right to you? As having
people do ask me to quantify, and to be honest, we didn't keep check, but I would say we were up there. You know. And at one point, and I think Hayley will remember this, I sort of remember the line producer writing to me and saying, or calling me and saying, you're making an awful lot of gowns. Do you think you'll really need them? And I said, I kind of know we will. You know, it's because, and having worked with Chandra as much as I have, I know she loves a quick change. You know, she likes, I mean, on Scandal, we had the same thing, you know, quick change. And why not? You know, why not give the audience the pretty, you know, a little bit of shoe porn, a little bit of gown porn. I think, you know, it was such a beautiful period and so lush, and the jewelry and the hair accessories. And so, you know, if you're going to do it, do it. Don't be, you know, a deep dive into as many costume changes as you can.
And quickly, because we have to wrap up, do you have a favorite? Can you pick a favorite, I guess, of the Charlotte looks?
Oh, I just love it all. I think I do have a great fondness for both of her wedding gowns. I just thought they ended up being quite beautiful, and I shouldn't pat myself on the back because it was the whole team, but I think they both served their purpose well for the story.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff. Lyn Paolo,
nice to meet
an Emmy
you.
nominee for Queen Charlotte, and a Queen Charlotte on Netflix. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, Hayley Nebauer for Black Cake, Sarah Arthur for The Continental, From the World of John Wick, Carol Case for Fargo, Mirren Gordon-Crozier for Lessons in Chemistry, and Lyn Paolo for Queen Charlotte. 5 great costume designers. Thank you all so much for doing this. We're going to do a roundtable here. I just wanted to start, like, what was it that made you want to become a costume designer? All of you have done such incredible work here, and obviously you had to start somewhere. So I guess, like, why did you want to get into this field? And I guess, Hayley, we'll start with you. We could go around, but I'd love to hear, like, what were your origins here, I guess.
For me, it was science fiction films in the 1980s, dressing up as a kid, and probably George Michael's Too Funky music video. I don't know if you remember that one where they're going down the catwalk wearing the handlebars and things. I was always attracted to the really sort of outlandish, fun, crazy 80s sci-fi costumes. And then the more I learned about it, the more I sort of fell in love with period costume. And then I kind of loved everything that combined elements from either of these. So, but they were the starting points.
Great. Sarah, how about you?
Well, I go back a bit further than you, Hayley, hence my age, but I loved all the Greta Garbo films and the Bette Davis films from my youth, and always loved all those glamorous costumes. So that was where I had the passion to start with, and then, you know, as life progressed, I fell into this role. started at the bottom and built and worked my way up. So, and I've learned a lot in the process, and I'm still learning a lot.
Carol, how about you?
Well, my background's theater, and that's where classical theater, and that's where I started working in wardrobe, and not as a designer. I never intended to be a designer. It just happened. And but I'm loving every minute of it. And all the classical background is great because it's all about the characters, and the step from the Stratford Festival to film and television wasn't as great as I thought it might be.
And Mirren, how about you?
I grew up in London, even though I don't sound English, but I grew up in Portobello Road, and I would go to the vintage market every Friday and Saturday, and became sort of obsessed with vintage clothing from that. I think that combination of watching John Waters movies and seeing how crazy and fabulous the costumes are in there, and then also my mom's a bit of a cinephile, so growing up watching all the classics, and I honestly think I wanted to be a costume designer from when I was 12 or something.
That's awesome. And Lyn, how about you?
Yeah, I think my story is similar to Sarah's in that I grew up in England, in the northeast of England, and I really didn't know that there was any such thing as a costume designer. I just knew that I loved, my mom, like your mom, was a huge movie buff, and but she was really into musicals. I mean, I still to this day, like Singing in the Rain is still one of my all-time favorites. So I moved to Los Angeles. I had a degree in English literature and education, and had every intention of being a teacher. Always wanted to teach, still want to teach. It's my great passion, working with young people, and literally fell into this business. Started as a PA, did craft service, production coordinator, kept moving up in different, and realized, I didn't want to be a producer, and I certainly didn't want to be an AD. And fell into the music video world of the late 80s, early 90s, music videos and commercials, and found my niche in the costume department.
That's amazing. Singing in the Rain still holds up. I showed it to my daughter. Just the Singing in the Rain part, right, with Gene Kelly, but she's like 5 and she loved it. So it still carries a great amount of weight. I feel like.
I know, I love it.
It's so good. All of you are, I mean, like we're like kind of saying, all of these shows are period shows to an extent. Even Fargo, Carol, like we said, like from 2019. As costume designers, do you enjoy do you enjoy doing period pieces versus contemporary, or does it not matter because they're always kind of maybe going to start in the same process? Or how do you kind of view that? I guess, Lyn, we'll start with you and go back around. So Hayley, you'll be last for this one, but Lyn, what do you think?
So I mean, I enjoy both, but for me, the real thing is you're creating a world. You read the script, one hopes you fall in love with it. I've been very fortunate in my career to work with some amazing writers, and when you open that script and you immerse yourself in it, to me, it doesn't matter if it's a period piece or it's, shameless and they're basically in rags. The thing for me is that the exhilaration is from, how am I going to create this world, and how am I going to help these actors suddenly feel like this other person? And I think that for me is where the joy comes in what I do for a living.
Yeah. Mirren, how about you?
I would say the same. I think contemporary and period I both like equally, but actually I think I prefer period a little bit more, just because it's sort of a challenge also finding the dead stock fabrics and making things and getting the tailoring right, and getting the silhouette, and such a different color palettes every period, and so it's and you get to learn and research and sort of educate yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. Carol, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm in the same boat as everyone else. It's whether it's period or whether it's contemporary, for me, it's all about the characters, and how do we make these people tell their story and help support the storytelling. And that's the biggest thing for me. And whether it's period, I mean, period is always fun. It's always a costume designer's dream to be able to, start from a petticoat and work your way out. But I think it's really either one. It's doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Sarah, would you agree with that kind of take?
Yeah, well, I've done quite a lot of both. And I think obviously with period, I love doing all the research, especially the early periods where you have to read a lot, where there's not much visual references available, maybe, sort of later on some portraits. But with contemporary, I always think, especially if it's a high-end contemporary drama, it's what I love doing is trying to guess what's coming, so that when it airs, you may have sort of pitched yourself into a new fashion era. So that's I love both, but equally, I think they've both got fantastic aspects, but also it is all about the characters as well. So yeah, it's what we do as costume designers.
Yeah. Hayley, you get the for Black Cake, you get both. I feel like contemporary, obviously, and period. It's a whole meal of costumes. I guess did you have a favorite, I guess, or can you pick?
I mean, it's nearly split 50-50, Black Cake across period and contemporary. But for me, the thing I love most is not whether it's contemporary or period, it's stepping into another story that I don't know. I love working on projects where I get to go to places and experience stories I'd know nothing about, whether that's in another country, it's in the past, it's in the future, it's present day, but it's something I know nothing about. I love the escapism of stepping on set and you're in a different time, place, setting, society, something that I've never lived through. And I get to do that on set at work, and I get to help to build that world. And I suppose the projects that I get less excited about are ones where I feel like, oh, I know this. If I read the script and it's not something that's new and fresh and exciting, and I want to learn about it, and I want to help step into that world on set and see and learn something different and experience something new. Projects that don't give me that don't excite me as much. But when I read off the page that this is something new, I've never done this, I've never seen this, it's a different world to create. That's what I love doing.
Yeah. It's wonderful stuff. You all have talked about like characters and like kind of having the how that impacts obviously what you're doing, and I guess like certainly the actors as well. I guess like how have you found working with actors, and is it kind of case by case where certain actors are going to maybe have a lot of opinions about what their costume should be, and it certainly depends on like the size of the role, I'd imagine too, and certain actors are maybe going to be more like whatever you guys think, or I guess have you kind of found that and like kind of in your careers? Hayley, we could start with you and then go back around to Lyn, but what do you think there?
Yeah, I mean, I think like everyone here, we've all experienced performers that come from a range of different levels of interest and enthusiasm. Sometimes you get the odd person who's really not that invested. Costume's not the thing that they're into, and you get people who absolutely love it and they come to you with a whole world of ideas, and people in between. And sometimes your ideas align with theirs, sometimes you inspire each other, and sometimes you've got to bridge the gap and bring those ideas together and find how you can collaborate to make one character that's that doesn't look like it's it's juxtaposition within itself. It's got to all work together. So it varies every time, but it's nice to have good communication and figure that out as you go and come to it with, I guess, optimism to reach a good end place.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, how about you?
Well, yeah, I've certainly on the Continental. That was the actors love costume to create their characters, and I think it really helps. And if you start, especially in period stuff, so everything was made, and that is a collaboration, and it's step by step. And I always give actors, a lot of say in their costumes, because I feel they need it. I wouldn't want somebody to hand me a costume and say, right, wear that for this interview, so I do have a lot of sensitivity towards them. And as Hayley said, some are, really interested in being a part of the process. Some are not so, but the majority, especially when it's period and they really possibly don't know about the period, they need all our help. And I do find that they do invest their time and energy in finding something that makes them feel that character.
Yeah. Carol, how about you?
Oh, pretty much the same. I think that that all the actors feel like they're they're wanting us to support them and to help them along in this journey of discovering the character. So I think most actors are invested to some degree. You will always find the odd person who doesn't, or who just feels intimidated by the whole process. But I think for the most part, most of the actors want to be invested, and we want to collaborate with them. It makes telling the story so much easier if we're all on the same page.
Yeah, for sure. Mirren, you obviously, like we were talking about with Brie and stuff, but I mean, I'm sure, like, yeah, how do you feel about this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of the same actors multiple times, and that always helps, like a shorthand. But sometimes, especially, I feel like working on TV, people are getting cast quickly, and you know way more about the story and the character than they do. And when they step into the fitting, you know, I think they're pleasantly surprised that they have someone helping them with their character and the slight nuances of that character as well.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of like great conversations too, right? When you can really get down to the specificity of like what a character would want to wear or look like, or even like down, like you were like even down to the shoes and stuff, like you were saying for Calvin. I just thought that's really interesting. Lyn, how about you? What is your experience like with a lot of actors and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the thing that I strive for in the fitting room is to make a safe space for the actor, to make sure it must be a horrible thing to walk in a room and take your clothes off in front of a stranger. And, you know, I always like to start with a conversation, not the costumes. Like, you know, what are your thoughts? How do you feel? And what do you think about this scene or that scene? And what will help you? So I always like to start with, you know, Stockard Channing used to say it's the confessional when I'm in a fitting with you, Lyn. So that, you know, they sort of tell you, it's just a lovely discussion. And it's one of the most amazing things about being a costume designer, I think, is that private time. I like to spend time alone with the actor at the beginning of a fitting so that they can feel comfortable and know that I'm on their side. I'm only there to help them. And how can we achieve what our director, our producer, our writer, the visual that we're aiming, you know, to produce for them, and how can we make sure that everyone in this discussion is happy, including the actor.
Yeah, incredible stuff for all of these. Like I said, these shows are really wonderful. Hayley Nebauer for Black Cake, Sarah Arthur for The Continental from the World of John Wick, Carol Case for Fargo, Mirren Gordon-Crozier for Lessons in Chemistry, and Lyn Paolo for Queen Charlotte. All these shows are great. All of your costume work is incredible. Thank you all so much for doing this. It was really great chatting.
Nice to meet you.
Very much.
Nice to meet you.
Bye,
Thanks for your
Hayley.
time.
Bye, everybody. Nice to
Bye.
meet you.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.